Welcome back to yet another day of Bookmas. As I am filming this right now, I am in the midst of filming everything. A lot of fun. It is the end of the year, as we all are aware, if we own a calendar. So I thought it would be fun to just kind of like sit down and chat through some things at the end of this year. You know, like a lot happens in a year, especially in the book community, and I can just never seem to get comfortable. You guys know, like by the end of the video, I'll be over here and just be on the floor. A lot happens in a year, so I thought that it would be interesting to kind of like sit down, chat through some things. So we're gonna be just doing a little laid back bookish chat. Grab a snack. Maybe you're, doing some chores. Maybe you're putting away some laundry. I love doing my sit down videos because they kind of give the feel and vibe of like podcast, because I just kind of sit down with the microphone and just bleh. But let's get into the answers that you guys gave me, because I went and asked you guys to give me some questions, topics. So here we go. I have quite a few of them. I don't know if I'll answer all of them, but we shall see. First off, for starting fun, books you really wished you loved but actually did not like. This feeling is hard as a reader, especially in the new age of social media and just how hyped up books get nowadays. Like, I feel like back in the day, obviously BookTube has been around for a long time, but the expansion of books on social media and just the heights that it has reached within the last few years, I feel like is just a whole entire new ball game for the world of reading. And I feel like something that comes with that, of like, if people are just talking about how much they love a book and you see so many people do it and then you don't love it, but you try really hard to. Let me look to my shelves. What is something that I just feel like I really try to force myself to like because everybody else likes it? Honestly, I feel like I did this more when I started BookTube. If you guys watch my videos, I feel like I do not do this now. I have no problem just saying that I don't like a book. But I feel like I really tried very hard to like the Shatter Me series and The Cruel Prince. Those are two that I feel like I had. One, I reread The Cruel Prince. When I read The Cruel Prince, when I first started doing, I wasn't even doing BookTube at that point, but I just made a few book videos because I love reading and I was like, ooh, I want to try to do it. One of them, I read The Cruel Prince and then I hated it. I hated it. It was my first ever step into fantasy, which, if I'm gonna be honest, I probably would never recommend The Cruel Prince for a beginner fantasy, ever, especially if you've never read fantasy before in your life, and I never had. The closest to fantasy I had ever gotten was Divergent. I had never even read Harry Potter or anything growing up. I feel like I tried really hard because then 2 years ago, I read the trilogy, and then I even read the new kind of spin-off series, and I feel like I just try really hard to like it when I just don't like it. I can appreciate it. Sometimes I would like edits and stuff on TikTok of the book, and also the Shatter Me series. That's another one where I can just see why people like it, but for some reason, I just kind of could not care less. It's not that I think it's bad, I just didn't care about it. Do you read with or without music? This is something that when I have talked about it, I feel like people are I actually very rarely ever read with music. I feel like if I'm out in public, I will read with music, and it has to be more lyrics. I'll just put on a random playlist of mine, because honestly, once I start getting into the book, the words kind of vanish. I'm not focusing. I'm aware that there is sound in my ear, but I'm not focusing. If all is going well, I'm focused on the book and not really the music. But I honestly, most of the time, just have on YouTube or a TV show in the background. I never have music on. This question is framed as audiobook versus ebook versus physical book. I'm going to rank them for you guys. I would say number 1, ebooks, reading on my Kindle, and then number 2, audiobooks, number 3, physical books. That's just where I'm at in my reading right now. If you were to even ask me earlier in the year, or even just I feel like I've answered this question so many times, but the fun thing about this question is that it can change at any point in your life. Where I'm at in life right now, I genuinely rarely ever read the book on the physical copy. I will go to Libby, I will go to Kindle Unlimited, I will do pretty much anything I can to read it on my Kindle. Me and my Kindle are like this. We are inseparable, especially because I recently just made the purpose of the Kindle stand with the page turner. Isaac is so entertained by it. Every time he walks into a room and I just have my Kindle stand and I'm having my page turner, especially if I'm laying down, he's it's like giving him the most entertainment I've ever seen in my life. So especially then, but I take my Kindle everywhere with me. If I'm out of the house, the Kindle's going with me. So obviously reading like on my Kindle is my top favorite form of reading. It used to always, like, I think if you would have asked me like a year or two ago, I always said physical books. I was like, nothing can take the place of a physical book in my hand. And while I still do love that feeling, I feel like at the core as a reader, that's just something that I will never not love, is like reading the physical book. I do prefer just having my Kindle. Audiobooks are next because I have been really loving, kind of within the past few months, something that will help like calm me down is listening to an audiobook and like playing a game or coloring or like doing just laundry or something like that. Listening to audiobooks, going on walks and stuff, I listen to audiobooks a lot. Like honestly, usually, especially if you see me reading nonfiction, I usually listen to the audiobook. Also, fantasy audiobooks I listen to a lot because I feel like it helps me grasp and imagine things better. But then, of course, I still love a physical book. Even though I'm ranking it last, it still is something that I absolutely love so much. OG Book Talk and the future of reading for newer generations. I definitely think, like, OG Book Talk, like, when we say this, I can just, like, remember it clear as day. The OG Book Talk books, your Cruel Prince, your Song of Achilles, the Addicted series, Punk 57, It Ends With Us, like all of the Colleen Hoover books, ACOTAR, and the like videos of people bringing like ACOTAR and Punk 57 to school and like having people in their class read like spy scenes or whatever. Like I can remember it so clearly of like content that was on OG Book Talk. If you guys don't know, it's kind of referencing like 2019, 2020, 2021 era of book talk, and it was just different. And honestly, you like could not escape the books that I just named off and a few other ones like Red, White, and Royal Blue, The Hating Game. Like there was quite a few that just were circulating nonstop. And obviously with book talk nowadays, like it's the same thing. Like I feel like there are books that are just cycled through because they have an insane amount of popularity that has derived from somewhere, like, you know, the Chestnut Spring series and Magnolia Parks. I would say Emily Henry's big on book talk. Like there's a lot of books that, you know, are big on it, but I just think OG Book Talk was a time. I think it was the beginning, obviously, since like that time frame period was when TikTok started becoming like a big thing. I think just the essence of like that time period of it on TikTok, like you go back and see like different time eras of different social medias. I just feel like it's a time and I appreciate it for what it was. I definitely feel like it was more tame. Like there wasn't as much drama and kind of it wasn't as intimidating back then. And I feel like if there was something I miss about TikTok in book talk back then, it's that I feel like it was a lot less scary. But reading for newer generations, I definitely think social media is impacting reading. Kind of spoke on it a little bit earlier, but I think it is impacting reading in a way that we've never seen before. I think in good ways and bad ways. There's two sides of the coin for pretty much anything in life. I feel like getting reading out there and feeling it's more manageable for people who may not have seen this as a hobby that they wanted to go into with social media and just how expansive things are, and seeing obviously like if something is popular now, the rise of like ACOTAR and different like even romance books and fantasy books that have made it to, I would say, mainstream media, because you can be on your side of book talk and know about it, but once it hits that form of like mainstream media that people who are not on book talk are hearing about these things, that's when you know it's like hit a certain aura and essence of popularity. I think now with reading kind of hitting that mainstream, obviously we all know reading's always been a thing, but I mean like the popularity, dare I say, aesthetic of reading and just people talking about it. I definitely feel like we've seen even more people now reading for like a leisurely hobby, because, you know, like obviously there's always been readers, but I feel like with social media and, you know, like so many things just get popularized, bring a new sense of attention to people who otherwise probably would not have looked to that as something that they would do if it were not for social media. I feel like we're opening that up with social media, so I definitely think it is impacting things, and I feel like reading is just such a good escapism hobby that I absolutely love. So obviously I love seeing it popularized because I love it, and I definitely think it is going to be affecting newer generations of reading. I also think one of the best things about reading being popular on social media is that speaking as somebody who always really, really, really longed for somebody to talk about in great lengths of like books that I loved growing up, and I've always loved reading so much. And I feel like part of the reason that kind of when I was in high school I didn't read like as much as I did growing up, I still read, but like I never talked about it with anybody, and it was never like a form of discussion. And I remember like if I saw somebody, like one of my friends, reading something, I would get so excited. There was just always this longing to speak about the things that I was passionate about with other people, but I never had anybody in my life that was passionate about it like me at that time in my life. So I feel like my favorite part of reading being popularized is just being able, I feel like for all those people who share that same similarity, to be able to speak with people online and watch people, even if they're not like directly speaking, being able to like sit down and watch a booktuber or book talker or bookstagrammer and see them talk about the things you're passionate about and have that discourse with them. I feel like it makes people feel very seen, heard, and in a way loved, which I really enjoy about reading being popular. And I feel like that's a big way reading will impact new generations. Tips to stay off TikTok and read more. This is kind of more of just like anything, like not necessarily TikTok, but I do understand that this is a big distraction, quote unquote, if you want to say. And I definitely could relate to that because I feel like I actually have not had TikTok for more than a month now, probably going on 2 months. I haven't had TikTok, and I have to say, TikTok, I deleted it from my phone. It just became a kind of point of like a lot of anxiety and toxicity for me is just kind of like what I was taking in. And I was like, I feel like I'm wasting so much time, kind of like this is saying, like, kind of doom scrolling instead of like, I literally found myself being, oh my gosh, I want to read this book, but I have been scrolling through TikTok for 2 hours and I have done nothing except make myself more anxious and found more things to be upset or angry or whatever about. I would say my number one tip, if TikTok is a point of kind of conflict for you, I would say, number one, if you feel like you can do it, delete it. I will tell you firsthand, I deleted TikTok, and since I have pressed that delete button, I have not found any want to re-download it. That's not saying that I would never go back to TikTok, but just like where I'm at in life right now, it's not something, and I've just been way more productive. I've gotten a lot more reading done too. Like I was talking about this the other day, the amount of books that I have read since deleting and also just like taking social media off of my phone, period. Insane how much time I was wasting on social media. And this is not meant to be a preachy moment of like, we should get rid of social media. I definitely think it's like times and phases in your life, and also just like finding a healthy balance in it. But if you don't want to delete it because you don't have to, one thing that I used to do that also helped, I put time limits. So I would kind of set a time limit with myself, and I was very, very strict on like, if it popped up and gave you the notification when you do the screen time thing of like, oh, you've ran out of time today, I would shut off the app and be like, okay, that's it for the day. So if there's anything that's distracting you like that, I would do something. If it's an app, set a time limit. If it is just the phone in general, maybe set a timer and like put your phone in a box or somewhere that is just not in your line of sight that you can forget about it for a little bit. To each their own. That's just kind of my tip. If there's anything distracting you, try to extract the distraction. What book has changed your life in the most significant way unintentionally? I would say probably some of Frederick Bachman's books. I feel like I said this about A Man Called Ove. Kind of the story of that really impacted me. I'm trying to think throughout the years, kind of books that I've taken pieces of with me in life. I would definitely say Firefly Lane. I know I talk about this book probably too often now, and I used to never talk about it, but now I do. That book is a tale of friendship, and ever since I had read that, it just like really impacted me. Honestly, Daisy Jones and the Six, there's a lot of things that Daisy Jones as a character has left a mark on me, and even just that story within itself. Those are ones off the top of my head. I mean, I feel like in every book that I read, there's a little piece of the book, positively or negatively, that breaks off and just enters a piece of my soul after reading it. Way to answer that question. Thoughts on reading a series in consecutive order versus spacing it out? I'm reading Harry Potter right now. I don't know if that reading vlog is out yet. That one is one that I've kind of read consecutively and also spaced out a little bit. I feel like the only time that I read a series consecutively is if one, all of the books are out, and two, I'm just so in the series and I just need to like get through every single book. I think even with ACOTAR, when I read it for the first time, I spaced it out. I think I spaced out between the first and the second book, and then once I got to A Court of Mist and Fury, I think I read ACOWAR and then the novella, and then it took me a while to get to A Court of Silver Flames. Honestly, I don't feel like I read anything consecutively within the like thought of like that's all I've read. Like I sat down and all I did was read the whole entire series and no books in between. I don't do that. I like spacing things out a little bit. I feel like if there was a time that I did that, it's very, very, very few and far between. I feel like I need to space it out a little bit. I don't think I ever read anything just like consecutively. I feel like if I did, it's because I would be hyper fixated and just so obsessed with it. Oh, Heartstopper. But I also feel like that's different because it's a graphic novel, so it was fairly easy to just like go through all of those. But I did read every single Heartstopper book in one sitting. That's the only one off the top of my head that I've ever read consecutively. Does being a booktuber ruin reading for you, or does it give a new purpose to reading? I actually got quite a few questions on this, of just kind of under that kind of question of like how reading has changed through making it your career. Obviously, it changes things. I actually think about this a lot. Obviously, as I spoke earlier, reading has been something I've always been so passionate about, and I've just yearned and longed for people to be able to share that passion and interest with in the same way that I do. It's such a beautiful thing to find people in a community who love something like you do and is just as passionate about it as you are, and having these amazing conversations that just leave you so fulfilled and so joyful of being able to speak to people who love the same things that you do. So that's a huge plus, that I have this community that I've always dreamed of, and being able to speak to people and just having people that care so much about the same things that you do. It's beautiful. I love it so much. I feel like within reading itself, the thing that it's changed the most within my reading is things that I'm reading and why I'm reading things. I feel like sometimes I have to take a step back and go, am I reading this because I want to read it? Or am I reading this because I think other people want me to read it? Am I even having any enjoyment out of it? Am I forcing myself to read some of these things? Like, I think one of the main things that I do that I really want is one of my goals in the new year to not do, is that I feel like when I sit down and I'll plan out a video, and also I'm not complaining about any of this is just answering the question. When I sit down to plan out a video, I'll be like, okay, I've thought up this video idea. Let me find books that fit around it. And so then I would find myself kind of in falling into book slumps more because of this. It's because I'm like, I don't think I'm reading books that I want to read. I'm reading books that are fitting this kind of idea that I have in my head, and they're not really books that I ever set out to read in the first place. A double-ended sword, or however that saying is, because on one hand, it has helped me find books that I don't think I would have ever read and loved because of it. On the other hand, it's led me to slumps, a lot of DNFs, and some low ratings, because I'm like, I just feel so negatively about this book because it's not what I want to be reading. I feel like I could be reading something else and having way more of a positive experience. But sometimes having this as your job and wanting to come up with these like cool video ideas that people want to see, but am I reading for myself anymore? I feel like that's the main thing. Am I reading for myself? You do kind of lose that a little bit, if I'm going to be honest. But I feel like one of my main goals for 2025 is to kind of put that passion back in, because I feel like when I first started, it was more of just like I would fit and do videos and just mood read. Like, it was all mood reading. I was never really like thinking of a video idea and then being like, okay, let me find books for it. It was like, I'm gonna read these books and find a way to make it into a video. I kind of want to get back to that, because I feel like you'll also be able to tell as a viewer that you're just having a better time reading and you're so much more fulfilled and joyful in it if you're doing the things that you like. But also still, I like taking recommendations and stepping outside of my comfort zone. That's something I like to do with my reading. I feel like that's also something that I've done this year because of video ideas. Kind of a balance of still doing video ideas, but also making sure that I majorly am just reading what I want to read and fitting that into content. Okay, favorite and least favorite genre. Favorite genres: romance, fiction, nonfiction, and fantasy. Least favorite thrillers. I want thrillers to work for me so bad, but like, if we all know, I rarely read thrillers, and when I do, they don't get the highest ratings. I just don't know why. I don't love thrillers. I was about to say historical fiction. I love Kristen Hanna, and I love the Taylor Jenkins Reid historical fiction that she did. I don't know actually. I just know thrillers I don't love. I feel like I'm falling out of love with the young adult genre. Do you think reading slumps can be avoided? To a certain extent, yes. I know that there is some discourse about the term like book slump, like, oh, this is just like a made up thing. Anything's kind of a made up thing when you think about it. We just found a word to, put on the feeling. You can get in any type of slump, a life slump, a fitness slump, any type of slump with something that you're doing in your life. And book slumps, I feel like to a certain extent, you can do things to make them less probable, like I spoke on earlier, like forcing yourself to read a book that you don't like. If you continuously are doing that, I feel like it's going to put a book slump. So if you just don't do that, I feel like it will help not having as many. But I feel like we go through stages in life where sometimes things just aren't as enjoyable. if you're going through something emotionally, or if it's just like you're busy, like you're going to go through things in life where like it's a little bit slumpy of a time, just period, but also with books. So to a certain extent, I feel like you can do things to avoid them, or if you feel them coming on, just like take a break or try to reread a favorite book, or like go to a genre or author you love. Like there are things you can do to like help it, but I feel like they're inevitable at a certain point just because slumps within itself are just kind of inevitable. Has the hype and demand of romantasy caused the quality of romantasy to go down? I don't necessarily know about speaking on quality. While I do feel like at the same time you can attest to the quality of a book, it's like when you think about it, is that just your personal opinion that the quality of the book is bad? Can somebody else can look at it and think it's good? I'm sure there are the base levels of like, okay, punctuation, vocabulary, the way that sentences are structured that can make a book just low quality. Yes, you have those things, but sometimes I feel like people are like, this is a low quality book, and most of the time it's just their opinion and not necessarily because of like actual just like literary devices that are making the book bad quality. I will say the popularity of the romantasy genre has made everything very, very repetitive. First of all, if anybody's read the ACOTAR series, I feel like once that started getting its hype, the sorry to say it, I don't like saying it, the shadow daddies, that was painful for me to say, phenomenon of like just this, y'all know what I mean, that formulaic male main character that's morally gray, that has these shadowy powers, has dark hair, most of the time violet eyes. Like you got that once that ACOTAR series started getting popularity, and I understand that that like kind of trope of like more of the like morally gray character has always been very like interesting, kind of like something in books, because it's very interesting to explore a morally gray character, especially within the fantasy genre. However, I think that there is now like a formulaic thing for both FMCs and MMCs ever since like the popularity of like ACOTAR, Fourth Wing, so many. I'm running into that now where it just feels like the same story, because you know that that worked in a popular book, so it almost feels like people are going to copy it. What characters do you relate to the most or see yourself in the most? This question is very vulnerable, and I am choosing to answer it because I do feel like it's also very interesting, but it is very vulnerable because like you pick up this book and see the characteristics of this character, and then it kind of feels like turning my skin inside out, and I'm letting you guys see how I feel about myself on the inside, that maybe are some things that I do not share on the internet, because believe it or not, I do not share a lot on the internet, but I will give some characters to you. First of all, Connell in Normal People. I feel like maybe that was part of the reason why it was very hard for me to get through. I first tried to read Normal People in high school. I did read it, didn't love it. Picked it back up this year, loved it. And I think about the book all the time where I rated it a 4 stars, but now I'm like, was it a 5? Because I think about it all the time. And Connell as a character, honestly, felt like somebody took the inside of my brain for the most part. Not absolutely everything, but for the most part. And was like, hey, these are Destiny's deepest, darkest fears about herself. Here's it on a page. Nora from Book Lovers, I talked about. Wynn from Happy Place, definitely I relate to in ways. I remember reading the Addicted Calloway Sister series, and the way that Lily has like anxiety and the way that she copes with anxiety of like, if you guys have read the Addicted Calloway Sister series, I think I just talked about this the other day, about like how she would like want to just like hide. Like she would just want to hide herself. I remember being like, that is me. Like I don't do that on the outside, but I would love to do it. Has your reading taste changed over the year? I would say absolutely. I think every year my reading taste changed, which I think I had also gotten a question that was kind of in the same vein as this of like, has your reading taste changed since you got back into reading? I don't know if those of you have missed it, but I kind of talked about, if you're interested, my reading journey. I kind of spoke about it a little bit earlier about how I've always read. Like since I have achieved the skill of reading, tearing through so many books, begging my parents to go to Barnes & Noble or Walmart and get books. Like it was like my like thing. And then when I was in high school, it wasn't as much of that. I would just read on Wattpad. So I would still read in high school, but that picking back up of like a lot of reading happened probably my junior year, COVID, if you will. And then senior year, oh, it was so like, I just remembered to really I found BookTube, I found Noelle Gallagher, and just fell in love with reading again. And I found some TikTokers and everything. When I first got back into reading my senior year of high school, I read a lot of just kind of like fiction. I remember I started off with The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Where the Crawdads Sing. I feel like because I was taking in a lot of people on social media that were reading just that. Like I remember reading like Murakami. I read a lot of books. Honestly, when I look back, I'm like, wow, that's not even something I think I would reach for now. Then it kind of progressed to more romance, not a lot of fiction. And then I was really, really into romance because I'm honestly a hopeless romantic. I love romance so much. And then I started getting into fantasy. Then it was just kind of like romance and fantasy. And then I feel like as of end of last year, but kind of this whole entire year, I have fallen back into fiction. I love reading fiction books, love reading romance, and I love nonfiction. Some fantasy, but I don't even feel like I read a lot of fantasy, but I still love fantasy, but I feel like my big three are just kind of like romance and fiction. How many books is appropriate for a book collection? I think that this is so personal. I feel like collecting anything is up to you. A thing with social media is that when you start sharing things that like you're collecting, there's a lot of voices. There's a lot of like, ooh, like people who are like, oh, I hope to have that collection one day, or yes, I share this interest with you. And then there are people who, maybe personally they don't want to collect as many things, and then it can be a term of like, that's just too much. Personally, I feel like collecting things is 100% personal to the person collecting them. For me, since I was little, and I mean little, I would watch movies and TV shows, and I've always had this idea of just like books surrounding me. Books are my happy place. Genuinely, I love being around books. I love being surrounded by them on my day-to-day life. I will just sit in here and stare at them. I have a love for books, period. Always wanted to have a collection of books. Have my own library. Everybody strives now, I feel like, for the like rolling ladder. I just have this vision in my head of just a room with a big window and a window seat, and it's just built-in bookshelves filled with books, and it's just like this magical library. Like, that is all I've ever dreamed of. So for me personally, I want to be collecting books. I love having physical copies of books. I love having books surrounding me. I love being able to talk about them and even just like lend them out and just have these physical books in my hand and flip through them and see the words on the page. It means so much to me, and that's why I collect a lot of them, and I will continue collecting them, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. That's also you. I feel like it's just so personal. Like, collect what you want to collect. If you could star in a book to movie adaptation, who would you want to play? This is very interesting. I feel like I would want a very dramatic role. Part of me is like, if we were taking like an Emily Henry book, or like a Chestnut Springs, or like a Abby Jimenez. If we're talking about romance, I feel like Abby Jimenez. I could do an Abby Jimenez book, but then again, I'm like, I don't think I'm funny enough for that. I would want a really dramatic role, like in a fantasy type of show. I just like daydream sometimes of these like dramatic instances that are in like fantasies and stuff, and like I've recently been watching the Harry Potter movies, and I'm like, how I would have acted through that scene. I think about this a lot. A book that you want to see as a movie, TV show adaptation. The Addicted Calloway Sister series, I'm honestly very, very surprised in all of the, I feel like, more OG book talk books, like The Love Hypothesis, Emily Henry book, just period, even just some of the new books that are getting adapted. I'm so surprised that like Netflix or somebody has not picked up the Addicted Calloway Sister series. I think it's entertaining, even as people who are not reading. It's so entertaining to like take just like these rich people and like all of the stuff that happens to them in these books. It's emotional, it's romantic, it's entertaining. It would make for great TV. It may be just me selfishly like really, really, really wanting it to be a series, but I continue to wait for the day that this will be an adaptation. Anything you did book-wise this year that you will not be continuing next year? One of them, my reading journal. Not that I won't have a reading journal, I'm not doing it in the very like overly artistic, aesthetic way that I started the year off and did majority of the year. I think I stopped doing it in like October, but I did it every other month of this year, and it kind of was more of like I just kind of took this like time out, and I was like, I don't really like want to do this reading journal. I feel like I'm just doing it for like the video, and it's just not something I want to do. I want something more practical, because I've talked about, like, obviously you guys know I have my Notion. If you guys watch my videos, I have my whole entire like Notion log, very built up of all of my book data. I want like a physical record of just like my thoughts and time. I also love writing, like physically writing. When I like plan out videos and stuff, I always have a journal that I write them down in first, and then I'll transfer over to Notion just because it's easier to track as I'm working on Notion, but I love writing things down. I'm not going to do the reading journal like I did it this year. It's going to be more of just like a genuine journal of like, okay, this is this month. Okay, I read this book. This is the rating. These are my my thoughts about it. This is kind of like what I'm thinking overall. Because I also think it's just very fun to like have journals to flip through of like your thoughts on anything, period. Of reading in that way where it just feels more like an actual log to me versus like some aesthetic thing that I'm trying to make. Looking at Goodreads/Fable reviews before buying books. I don't do this before buying books. If I'm looking at, like, if I see somebody talk about a book or I see a book somewhere, I'll be like, oh, like, I'm not in the bookstore looking at Goodreads. Actually, I have kind of started to do this recently. I feel like I don't do as much book shopping at all, but I do feel like if I'm watching a video and then I see somebody talk about a book, I will look it up on Goodreads and like kind of look through reviews and stuff. Or like what I do is if I'm in the middle of the book, motivation for it is kind of like lacking a little bit, or I'm like, okay, let me look at some reviews. I don't know how I'm feeling about it. That's what I do most of the time. And I like doing it. I feel like if you avoid spoilers, it's very helpful to see like kind of what people are saying about it to kind of motivate you or demotivate you. If you're already feeling like DNFing, you're seeing kind of like more overwhelmingly negative reviews and that's what's going to get you to put the book down. I feel like either way, it can be very helpful. Biggest ick you've gotten while reading this year. I definitely feel like the grumpy sunshine trope. I feel like authors, there's this line, you guys, there's this line of grumpy in a way that you can root for, where it's more of just like, they're more closed off. They're not mean. They don't say mean things. They do not act in a mean manner to you, but they're just more like guarded, but it's grumpy in like an endearing way where you're like, oh, you're being grumpy this morning. You know what I mean? One thing that really gave me the ick, and I actually just read a book recently that did this, where it's like, they are calling the main guy grumpy, but he literally says like rude things about the main character, just antagonizes her and says like hurtful, mean things to her. And it's like at some point you're supposed to root for him because he's just grumpy. That's not grumpy. That's just being a jerk. Most of the times I feel like it's just taken too far. What are your qualifications? That's the choice. What are your qualifications for a 5-star rating? It differs by genre. I feel like at the very base of it, did I enjoy it? Am I emotionally invested in the story? Could I not put the book down? Is it all that I'm thinking about? Do I want to run and tell everybody about it? Can I remember like literally just specific quote off the top of my head? Did it impact me emotionally in a way? And did I have a good time reading it? Do you feel like if you're reading a lot of romance books at a point, they get kind of repetitive and you get bored? I definitely feel like too much of something in a short period of time, any of it's going to get repetitive. Like if you're reading a bunch of fantasy books, the plot's going to get repetitive, not because they're all the same, but because I feel like formulaically, looking at it from a formula of the plot standpoint, they all kind of follow that same, plot line formula. Same thing with thrillers, same thing with romances. Like, I feel like in any genre, you're going to get that. Too much of anything in a short amount of time, you're going to get repetitive and bored of. How do you feel about modern references in books? TikTok, Taylor Swift, etc. I don't know if y'all remember, I used to go on rants if a book talked too much about TikTok or modern day social media. Honestly, that's one of my biggest icks, is social media just being so heavily the plot line of a book. I just don't like it for some reason. I really don't like it. And honestly, I feel like it dates a book with references to like different things. Like if a book's going to write about like Taylor Swift's like Eras tour right now because it's popular, I feel like that's going to date a book. Same thing with like outfit choices that are so, what do you want to say, overtly of that time era. Like when you would read Wattpad and they're like a blue skater skirt or like galaxy leggings or like a mustache shirt, and you're like going back and reading it and you're like, yeah, you dated yourself in the worst way possible. Best app for reading tracking. Definitely, I love Fable's interface so much. One of my biggest goals of the new year is like, since we're starting on a clean slate, just really just stepping into Fable. I love what they're doing with their interface. I feel like the aesthetic, and they pay attention to what readers want. They have 5-star ratings. Like it's everything you could want. Also, everybody's on Goodreads. I also know that people really love Storygraph. I've tried that one multiple times. It's just never worked for me. Do you still think you would read as much as you do if you didn't do it for a job? Absolutely. Always been a reader in the way that I am, of like when I love something, I want to do it all the time. It's escapism for me. It always has been. If I wasn't doing this for a job, I have always found time for reading, always. That is it for this bookish chat today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys got some nice little discourse, or at least this helped you through whatever it may be that you may have been needing help with, or entertained you for a little bit, at least, I hope. If it did, you guys know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff that you guys know how to do. Thank you so much for watching another another Bookmas video, or maybe this is the first one. Catch up, keep on going. We got more to go. I'm going to be posting until the 24th. That's going to be the last day of Bookmas for me. So we have a long ride coming, guys. It's been a long time coming. I love you so much. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will see you guys tomorrow.